What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about the big fundamental, Tim Duncan, the greatest power forward in NBA history. And today we're going to be focusing in on his 2003 championship run, which I believe is one of the most impressive championship runs in NBA history. And I think when talking about Tim Duncan in general, he often is overlooked and underrated, and the same thing can be said about his 03 playoff run. So in this video, I just wanted to highlight and show you guys why I believe this 03 playoff run from Tim Duncan is one of the greatest in NBA history. So just to give you guys a quick refresher, entering this 03 season, Tim Duncan, he was 26 years old and in his 6th NBA season, and it had already been 3 years since the Spurs won their last championship in 1999. And for the past 2 years, they've been knocked out in the second round of the playoffs by the Los Angeles Lakers. And this Spurs team in 2003, it was the beginning as well as the end for a lot of things, as entering the year, David Robinson, he was 37 years old, and he already announced this would be his last NBA season. And on the flip side of that, you also had Manu Ginobili coming in, a 25-year-old rookie. You also had a young Tony Parker, who was in his 2nd NBA season, and you had great role players on this team like Steven Jackson, Malik Rose, Steve Smith, Steve Kerr, as well as Bruce Bowen. And entering the year, the Spurs had the 4th highest odds to win the championship behind the Lakers, Kings, and Mavericks, who were all in the stacked Western Conference. So there were definitely some high expectations for this Spurs team with some nice young talent, and they were really looking to get revenge after 2 premature exits in both the 01 as well as the 02 playoffs. And throughout the first 20 games this season, the Spurs were definitely not in championship form, as they only had a 12-8 record, and they were tied for 4th in the Western Conference, and they had the 8th best record in the entire NBA. But over the remainder of the year, the Spurs would go 48-14 and finish with the best record in the NBA at 60-22. And Tim Duncan this year, he would average 23.3 points per game, 12.9 boards, 3.9 assists, 2.9 blocks, while shooting 51.3% from the field. And this great year by Tim Duncan, as well as the Spurs as a team, that would lead to him being the back-to-back MVP, finishing 4th in the Defensive Player of the Year voting, and he was also first-team All-NBA, as well as first-team All-Defense. And one thing I do want to note very quickly is just how stacked the 2003 Western Conference was. You have the 60-22 Spurs, the Mavericks also won 60 games, the Kings won 59 games, the Timberwolves won 51 games, both the Lakers and Blazers won 50 games, the Jazz won 47, and the Suns won 44. And the 6th best team in the Western Conference, they would have finished as the number 1 seed in the East. And I think that really shows 2 things, just how tough the West was, but also just how weak the Eastern Conference was for the majority of the 2000s. So in the first round, Tim Duncan and the Spurs, they would face off against the 44-38 Suns, who finished with the 8th best record in the West. And this Suns team was led by 2 All-Stars in Shawn Marion, as well as Stephon Marbury. You also had a young Amari Stoudemire, who won Rookie of the Year, an older Penny Hardaway, as well as a younger Joe Johnson. And in Game 1 of this series, that Suns team would pull off a stunning upset as Stephon Marbury had the game-winning buzzer beater 3. And this Game 1 loss was a huge wake-up call for the Spurs team, and it really helped them get their act together. And over the next 5 games, the Spurs would win 4 out of those 5 games, and Tim Duncan, in the closeout Game 6, he would have 15 points, 20 boards, 10 assists, along with 4 blocks, and he would help the Spurs eliminate the Phoenix Suns. And for this series, Duncan averaged 18.7 points per game, 16.0 boards, 5.2 assists, 3.3 blocks, and 0.3 steals. Now in the second round, the Spurs will be matched up against the Los Angeles Lakers. And this was a big-time series with a ton of stakes. As I said before, the Lakers had knocked the Spurs out in the second round each of the previous 2 years. And also this Lakers team was looking for the unprecedented 4-peat that hadn't been done since Bill Russell's Celtics. And this Lakers team during the regular season had a record of 50-32. But I do think that record is a little deceiving, as Shaq had missed 15 games, and in general, this Lakers team, they really coasted their way through the regular season as they were waiting for the playoffs where they really proved themselves and once again won another championship. And unlike the Suns series, the Spurs, they would not slip up in these first two games as they would take a 2-0 lead over the defending champion Los Angeles Lakers. And the Lakers, heading back to LA down 0-2, they definitely had too much pride to go down 0-3, and they won Game 3 by 15 points. Now entering Game 4, the Spurs were looking to take a commanding 3-1 lead, and through the first half, it definitely looked like they were, as at one point, they had a 17-point lead. And Duncan in this game was absolutely phenomenal, having 36 points, 9 boards, 5 assists on nearly 60% shooting. But unfortunately for the Spurs, Shaq and Kobe, they were just too much, as they combined for 64 of the Lakers' 99 points, and they would erase that 17-point deficit and end up winning the game by 4 points. So those two games in LA, the Lakers were definitely on their heels, fighting for survival, but now the pressure flipped back to the San Antonio Spurs, and they had just dropped 2 games in a row. And I think this game for San Antonio, it was definitely a must-win game, as you can't go back to LA down 3-2 versus the 3-time defending champions. I don't see the Spurs winning that Game 6 with those circumstances. So in this Game 5, Tim Duncan, he was once again phenomenal, having 27 points, 14 boards, 5 assists on 50% shooting. And the Spurs once again got out to a huge double-digit lead. And entering the fourth quarter, they were up by 12 points. But just like in Game 4, the duo of Shaq and Kobe would help quickly erase that lead. And with 11 seconds left, the Lakers had the ball, only down 2 points.
Shaq up high, played by Robinson, down to 10. Bryant trying to shake off Bowen. Here's Ori for 3!
So that miss by Robert Horry, that is one of the biggest moments in this Lakers and Spurs rivalry, as that shot, it basically decided who won this series, as in Game 6, the Spurs would head back to LA and blow the Lakers out by 28 points, behind Tim Duncan's 37, 16, and 4 on 64% shooting. And in this series versus LA, Tim Duncan, he averaged 28 points per game, 11.8 boards, 4.8 assists, 1.3 blocks, and 0.3 steals. And the Spurs were finally back in the Western Conference Finals for the first time since 1999. Now in the Western Conference Finals, the Spurs were matched up against the Dallas Mavericks, who had a 60-22 record, tied for the best record in the NBA. And this Mavs team was led by Dirk Nowitzki, Steve Nash, Michael Finley, and Nick Van Exel. And in Game 1 of this series, Tim Duncan would come out on fire, having 40 points, 15 boards, 7 assists on 70% shooting. And for the majority of this game, the Spurs were dominating, as their biggest lead was once 18 points. But after the Mavs implemented a hack-a-shack strategy on Bruce Bowen, they would find a way to claw back and eventually win this game by 3 points. And I think one thing that plagues this Spurs team is getting big leads and finding a way to blow them. But on the flip side of that, I think one thing the Spurs team showed is they bounce back and they are very resilient. And heading into Game 2, that was basically a must-win game, as you can't go down 0-2 this Mavs team heading back to Dallas. And Duncan in this game, as he had done all postseason long, he once again showed up big, having 32 points, 15 boards, 5 assists on 52.4% shooting. And the Spurs, they would go on to win 3 of the next 4 games behind Tim Duncan's amazing play. And in this series, Duncan, he was once again fantastic, averaging 28.0 points per game, 16.7 boards, 5.8 assists, 3.0 blocks, and 0.8 steals. Now, after that great series from Duncan in the Western Conference Finals, the Spurs were definitely looking for more of that in the NBA Finals, as they were matched up against the 49-33 New Jersey Nets. And I don't want to take anything away from this Nets team, as they did make the NBA Finals, but I think everyone needs to understand they were playing in the weak Eastern Conference. And honestly, they might be the worst team the Spurs faced this entire postseason run. And I do give the Nets credit for taking this series 6 games, but in the end, Duncan and the Spurs, they were just too much. And Duncan in this series was absolutely phenomenal, averaging 24.2 points per game, 17.0 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 5.3 blocks, a finals record, and 1.0 steals. And he was rightfully named the finals MVP. And really the one notable moment and notable game in this series is the closeout game in Game 6, where Duncan had 21 points, 20 boards, 10 assists, and 8 blocks, while shooting 47.4% of the field in an effort that would help the Spurs win their second NBA championship. And this Spurs team, they absolutely ran the gauntlet in the Western Conference, and I think them playing the Nets in the finals, it was kind of anticlimactic, as they were one of the worst teams they faced in the postseason, but nonetheless, the Spurs, they won the championship, and they deserve all the credit for doing so. And one thing I always hear regarding Tim Duncan is how he always had these stacked Spurs teams. And when looking at this 0-3 Spurs team, I don't see how you could say they were a stacked team. The offensive help that Duncan had, it was average at best. You had Tony Parker averaging 14.7 points per game. You had Steven Jackson averaging 12.8 points per game. You had Manu averaging 9.4 points per game. You had Malik Rose averaging 9.3 points per game. And you had David Robinson not even averaging over 8 points per game. And I can already hear people saying that offensive help is not just scoring. And yes, I do agree, there is more to offense than just scoring, but scoring is a huge part of the offensive help. And Duncan, in these 0-3 playoffs, he averaged 24.7 points per game, 15.4 boards, 5.3 assists, and 3.3 blocks. And he led his team in all 4 of those categories. And he did that while being the best defender on this Spurs team. So he dominated in all aspects of the game, and he carried the Spurs team in basically everything you could ask. And Duncan in the first round, he led the Spurs in 4 out of 5 of the major categories. In the second round, he led them in 3 out of 5. In the Western Conference Finals, he led in 4 out of 5. In the finals, he led once again 4 out of 5. And he did that while playing some top tier competition. You have Shaq, Kobe, Dirk, Jason Kidd, Kenyon Martin, Steve Nash, Stephon Marbury, as well as Michael Finley. And all those players played on some really, really good teams. And I think this Duncan 0-3 playoff run, it checks every box I look for in an all-time great postseason run. I rank this run amongst the all-time great runs. I think it is definitely top 10 and can rank anywhere from 3rd best all the way to the 6th best run in NBA history. And I hope after watching this video, you've gained some added appreciation for Duncan's 0-3 season and you realize just how impressive it really was. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time.